Town meeting members, please take their seats. Claim them, whatever you want to do, but don't remove them from the auditorium. Precinct chairman, take a count. Denise is going to do it. Precinct 1 is 9. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 19. Precinct 3. How many is precinct 3? Precinct 3 is 12. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 17. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 11. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 17. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 14. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 10. Yeah, doing any two ways. It's almost the same. There are 109 town meeting members present. I remind you that if you're not a town meeting member, you do not sit in these two sections. Visitors, they sit in the rear or over in that section. To be on my right, that section over there is for visitors and town department heads. Also, a reminder to make things go easier. I'm going to remind you a couple of things. The first row here is reserved for people coming down to speak. I don't want complaints about people taking time. Occasionally, there are people on that end of the aisle that are very close to that microphone. They will signal me, but if I don't see you over there and you're not here, don't blame me, all right? The next thing, decorum. A couple of things that we tend to lose when we get in heated debates. One, now, again, I'll repeat, this is decorum. The sound of the gavel should mean that I intend to be doing business or to stop or declare a vote. That isn't just a hammer. I might try it for that. Anyhow, decorum. We have a lot of visitors here. The order of speakers. First, the person who presents the motion. I only accept positive motions, and they must come from one of the town meeting members, a chairman of a standing committee, and one of the 6 non-voting members of town meeting, which include the town manager, chairman of the Board of Selectmen, the town engineer, the chairman of the school committee, and the superintendent of schools. Those are the people who are non-voting members of town meeting. They can make motions. Any motion that is received that has not been printed in the report in excess of 10 words, everybody must have a copy. That has been a practice for several years now. The other is we could give credence to speakers who have made a request, who are not a town meeting member, can be recognized. There is no such thing as yielding your time. If you've come up here, everybody is given the opportunity of 10 minutes, but 10 minutes usually is way too long. You can sell it in 3, raise doubts in 4, and by 5 minutes you start to sink it. unless there's a long presentation. Those are the basics of this meeting. When I call for a voice vote, let me finish this, and if you want to come down here, please. I'm giving you this information before we do the vote. Yeah. I wanted to do this because at this time you people were making a lot of noise, you could not hear. We will do that at the conclusion of this scenario. This is a forewarning, it's a recess still. Part of taking the attendance. On the procedures again, there's no yielding of your time. Use your time once. If you feel you must speak again, it's only to answer back a reply. If you've come to the microphone to ask a question and need a reply, that does not count against your time. All that, besides, the most important rule is, I haven't had to speak too much about it. If you are recognized by the moderator and told to cease and desist or digress, and you've been warned more than 3 times, you can ask the constable, I can ask the constable to have you removed from the meeting until such time as you are meant to take a vote. However, that being said, now, will you all please rise and join me in saluting the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just a short summary so that everybody knows where we left off. At the last meeting, we convened at 7:45 with 99 present. When we counted the votes, we had as many as 112 and as few as 92 voting. So there was always a quorum. We also received requests from reserve time to certain changes in the progress of our meeting. Article 2 is still on the table, and so is the budget. We have dispensed with many of those tabled items, and we're now down to remaining is budget. We start with page 33, Town Accountant, which was still on the table. We have Articles 13 and 16, which have collective bargaining. That is still on the table. We have some unpaid bills, Article 36, some deposits possible for the stabilization fund, which is Articles 37 and 38, and a rescission of borrowing. We will take reconsiderations. That those people who have been notified that they will be reconsidering a particular article before we do Article 2, which is the last item on our agenda. The moderator has prepared a statement of certification. I'm not going to read it. I'll enter it into the records. All the proper things that I have seen and have recorded and accounted for are designated as being omitted or for some reason incomplete. At this time, Do we have any comments from the front table on previous information? Do you have any? Fine. I do want to also remind you, only official business is on this front table. There might be other material outside the room. That's not official business to discuss unless it's under a warrant article. And if there's any motion to come out of that material, it should have been in the moderator's hands and the clerk's hands by this time. If you have no objection or any reason to do things different, we will begin with Article 11, the budget. And I'm going to take this big heavy book. And we left off on Article, the town accountant budget on page 33, which was a recommendation of $230,739. It was requested to pick it up at this evening. Essentially, a lot of people did speak on it, and as far as that goes, the whole of Department 33, Town Accountant, is open for discussion. And then, Mr. Hill.
Mr. Moderator, a motion to take Article 11 off the table?
A motion to take off the table. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That is 804. On the original article, or the motion, or whatever. Any further discussion? This is on the town accountant budget. Mr. DeFelice.
More of a point of information, Mr. Moderator. On the original and on the subsequent handout on the budget, there's no column to the left of fiscal 15 request that shows what the actual 14 was. So how are we supposed to compare? How do we know, without going through, I guess, the other book, what increases the various positions have? I don't think this is adequate because we have no way of comparing what's proposed to what was the actual cost of last year. So do we have to ask for every single line item to get that information? Is that how it has to be done?
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Hill.
there were two salary sheets given out. The first was given out immediately the very next night the town meeting met after we tabled this item. And then the following week, we passed out another salary sheet that had the comparison to 2014 in it.
I guess I didn't get the second one. I guess I didn't get the third one. I have this one that has.
Well, there's not three. There's just the original, and then the second one we passed out with 2014 next to it because we anticipated that question, but it took an inordinate number of hours to try and calculate that.
Well, that's a
Still
shame.
doesn't match up, but-
That's a shame, Mr. Chairman, because if it was done the right way the first time, it wouldn't have taken an inordinate amount of time. Is this the sheet? Do I have
Actually,
the sheet?
Mr. Moderator, I can't let that go. It would have to take an inordinate amount of time for us to do a qualified evaluation of this year's budgets against last year's expenses. It's very difficult for us to line it up with all the changes that took place in town. We did do a lot of math and calculation against it. It was just hard to present in a format that matched up year to year, which is why we tried to present it the way we did. But anyway,
Is this the correction? Is this the sheet we're talking about?
I can't see it. Yeah, do you have another one? All right, Ed. I might have it here. Yeah, here. See, 2014 budget.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you, Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Mr. DeFelice.
Mr. Crimmins.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Barry Crimmins, Precinct 4. I'm assuming it is somewhere in here, and I just haven't been able to locate it, but the position of internal auditor that appears in the FY14 budget, but not in the FY15. Again, if I'm looking at the correct sheet, I'm guessing that position perhaps was moved to some other location, but through you, could somebody speak into a microphone and respond, please?
So,
I'm
Mr.
hearing
Crimmins?
about 4 different things.
Mr. Crimmins, if I might add.
What
for you,
page is that
If you
on?
look at the comments at the bottom
What
of
page
that
is
budget,
that on?
it's about the 6th line down. There's a note that begins, "The internal auditor's salary is now in the town manager's budget."
So,
It is on page 33 in your...
gotcha. Thank you.
Mr. Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dave Lurie, Precinct 6. The earlier speaker said that the budget information that we asked for was in these handouts. And I just want to understand, as a procedural question, Mr. Moderator, are we voting on the handout, or are we voting on the budget that's built into the book that was handed out in the beginning of the town meeting?
As far as I'm concerned, it's what's in the book.
So the information that was handed out is not going to be relevant to our vote?
Not
Am I
unless it
correct?
said it's a...
Well, what am I missing? Am I
There was
missing?
information that was requested to back up and support the numbers in the budget.
Furthermore, there was also a vote taken at the beginning of town meeting, either the first or second night, to table the budget for very specific reasons. Could we hear the minutes that were taken from that night as to what was the context of having the budget tabled at that time?
I think that would be out of order because the clerk is not necessarily required to keep the backup information on a motion other than the fact that the motion was made, who made the motion, what the motion was, the text of it, and a procedural motion is not debatable in the first place. So the other is what you heard, is what you got. If you want to ask for a copy of the videotapes, whatever they are, of this meeting, they are available through our cable provider. But that's only the basic information, and the vote count is required. When it comes to motions on articles, they have to be very specific and so recorded. That and the
If-
count. So
Excuse me, Mr. Moderator. So if the town clerk had taken notes during that meeting, is that material available for us to hear from that town clerk so that we could all hear what notes were taken on that night?
please come to the mic. Mr. Hammond.
I think, or what you're asking for, the reason, I don't know necessarily in my notes why we tabled it. I believe what you may be referring to is that it was tabled because you all wanted more information about previous year's salaries. But I don't necessarily note that in my town meeting minutes. What I will note is that there was a motion to table the budget on this specific date, and then whether it was a voice vote that passed or whether it was a standing vote. But I don't necessarily get into the actual reasonings for why everything was asked to do, just what happened.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So from what I understand, then, we're asked to then remember what happened at the beginning of town meeting. If anybody remembers, we were given a budget that bundled all of the different department information so that we couldn't see it, forcing the Finance Committee to create a lot of footnotes in which you couldn't align what happened in the past and where are we going with the budget. We had no idea. We were voting blind as to what direction this whole thing was taken. There's just pretty much a bottom line number that we had to vote on without the ability to compare. So that's what we're being asked to do. I think the spirit and the good faith of what was requested that night is totally being overlooked. I don't believe that there's a lot of trust left over from what happened from that beginning of town meeting to where we are now, and as a result, I'm going to vote no. And the rest of this budget discussion, I guess, is going to be open, but I am not in favor of a budget that was tabled for a specific reason and we're not being honored with the information that we were promised.
Mr. Lurie, on the handout, it said Finance Committee comparisons of salaries, and that's what Mr. Crimmins had made a request of, and that the comparisons of the 2014 budget is on there, and the next column over is the fiscal 15 requests. That's the best information. They did a lot of time to get this information. That was the request. It wasn't a request to change the numbers or anything else. It was for that information.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, but in reality, we're going to be voting on the book. We're not voting on the attachments. We can't take the notes that they worked hard on and bring that into what it is we're voting on and say, gee, did the numbers actually fit from the additional handouts back into the budget that we're being asked to vote on? We're not voting on the document that was handed out. So that's my concern,
Well, let
is that
me,
there's no way of really
let me
squaring, we can't
remind
square
town
that.
meeting. When whoever makes the motion, in this case, the Finance Committee, I call for the dollar amount. That is we vote on the bottom line. We don't administer line by line. Now, this is a different budget format. And I granted it's very difficult to follow, but the best answer I can give you is that shows you the difference of the bottom line of the previous year with the current proposal. That's all I can.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. But really what we're being asked to do is approve a budget right at the 11th hour, and then what's going to happen? They're going to next year give us some more hidden facts that we're going to be asked in the future to vote on based on precedents that said, sure, hey, look, they voted last year on the same format,
Mr. Lurie,
and it's
Mr.
okay.
Lurie.
That's my argument. That's my argument. So,
Mr. Lurie,
yeah.
this discussion has been made, the information has been available. We've heard that discussion before. We're now
Thank you.
to get into the meat of it. Mrs. Frankel.
I think that we can all remember back 9 nights ago or whenever it was when we started the budget and we had this discussion back then. There is a new format. Let's go over it one more time so that everybody's clear on it. There's a new format this year. There's been extensive notes that were put together. At this point in town meeting, we need to trust our officials, once again, who have done a tremendous amount of work. Excuse me? Mr. Moderator?
Yes, you're speaking.
They put a lot of effort into this new format of the budget that was requested by the town manager and the other department heads in the reorganization. There are extensive footnotes in here. Let's read those footnotes. Let's not ask questions that we have the answers to in front of us so that we can work towards ending this on a positive note. All of the answers to these questions are right here. We have different things in different departments. That's not going to change from now on. It's only changing this year. Next year, you're going to see the same formatted budget the way it is. So this is the way it is. These people have done an extensive amount of work on this. It all matches up. If it didn't match up, these 17 people that sit on the Finance Committee would have added all that up. And I implore you to do some trust right now, and it all adds up, and let it go. Just let it go.
On the motion, which is to appropriate $230,739 for the town accountant's budget, if there's no further discussion on the amount, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It's voted. At this time, so that we get things going in the proper cycle, I'll continue at this point. It'd be better when we go further. Department 34, Treasurer Collector.
$546,587.10.
On the account, Treasurer Collector account, I have some, Mr. Crimmins.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Barry Crimmins, Precinct 4. I do have several questions on this budget. And although the information may be in front of me, it still elicits some questions. So through you, Mr. Moderator, could I just get an explanation, a clarification on the principal clerk's line? For 3 positions, it appears that the net amount is going down by $800. Is that correct?
Mr. Hill?
Just a moment, please.
Through you, Mr. Moderator. That line item was over budgeted in 14 and now reflects what we expect we actually will spend.
Okay, thank you. The delinquent tax collector's position, there's apparently no change, at least according to the, is that correct?
Yeah, that is actually an outside contractor, so yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. The positions,
No, I was wrong. That is not. That is an employee. And again, we have not settled with that particular bargaining unit, so those positions are in there at current salaries.
okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Hartman. That's a good segue then into my next question, going now back to the booklet. And on page 34, in the final footnote, that says the treasurer collector and the assistant treasurer collector received an increase in accordance with a 2.5% step increase in the grid. Are those 2 positions in the union, or are they not in the union?
They are unionized positions in a union that has settled its contract.
Okay. For the salary items that are in unions that have not settled, do the salary figures that we will be voting on go into effect on July 1 or only after the various contracts are settled?
The numbers you're voting will be effective July 1 throughout the budget.
Okay, so throughout the budget, the numbers shown that we vote will go into effect on July 1, even if it's an employee whose union has not settled their contract. I just want to be clear on that.
Yes, that's substantially correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Any further discussion? If not, on the amount of $546,587.10 for the treasurer collector, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. Go to page 35.
$276,000.
Any discussion? If not, on the motion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It's voted. Department 36, Townhouse Budget.
$485,641.96.
Could you repeat that with slow numbers? Slowly, just so I'm making sure I'm transcribing it right.
$485,641.96.
485-64196. Okay. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? No. Motion is carried. Department 37, page 37, procurement.
$151,027.99.
Is there any discussion? Mr. Mullen?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bob Mullen, Precinct 2. Can I just ask, to the Finance Committee, general question, how many new positions are we adding to the whole town department budget this year?
I believe it's a net of 2.
Only 2?
Yes. So in this particular case, Mr. Mullen, the additional position that you're looking at, which is the Assistant Procurement Officer, which is in the salary detail budget, was actually dollars that were pulled in from a variety of budgets that were targeted for procurement. They were actually pulled into a procurement position and consolidated.
Okay, you said 2 positions, but I think I know in the past couple of departments, I didn't say anything, but weren't there a couple other positions that were noted as new?
Yep.
So that's where I'm getting confused about this whole budget footnote process here. Where I think I asked last, forgive me if I, seem a little agitated, but last town meeting I asked that we could prepare a sheet, like a 1-sheet, listing all the new positions. Is that in this book at all? I didn't see it. I was looking for it.
What we did was on Mr.
I
Mullen.
know, but I'm just, as a town meeting member, we all put a lot of work into this too. And I think, I'm just speaking for myself, I think some other people might also feel the same way. Come to town meeting, we take a lot of amendments, we take a lot of handouts. But at the end of the day, I'm still looking for some summary sheets to help me when it comes to the meeting after a long day of work, like everybody else, to refresh my memory. How many positions are we adding overall? Because it does cost every taxpayer in the end more money. And so I just don't feel like I'm being informed how many new positions we have in this town government.
So, Mr. Mullen, on page 26 is
Yes.
a chart of changes in positions and departments from 2014 to 2015.
Yep.
It's very detailed as to what departments are losing positions and how many are being added and what are being changed. And Mr. Town Manager, maybe you can correct me, but is that correct? Is it 2.5 positions actually? Total net new positions.
I think, actually, I think it's slightly less than 2.5, but yes, there are really just 2.5.
So 2.5, so what does that show me in dollar amounts? How much is that 2.5 positions? And
It's not a whole dollar amount. It's spread throughout all these position
Okay, let me just
changes.
ask in a different way then. Maybe I'm not
Yeah.
clear. I'm just for my own benefit. 2.5 positions. How much additional money is that adding to this year's budget?
In terms of this budget that's currently under discussion,
Yes.
you can see that it's basically flat, and it has a new position, because there's been a new position and some reorganization. The only budget that I can think of that's been impacted in any significant way by a new position is a new position in the police department to supervise the centralized dispatch.
Okay, so,
And the DPW.
Oh, yeah, and there are positions that DEP has actually mandated in DPW.
okay. So through you, Mr. Moderator, to the town manager, so when you say the budget is flat, you're saying there's no change from the total dollar amount from last year's budget?
The total town budget on the town side for operations is up 3%. And bear in mind that most of the employees who are slated for raises are getting 2.5%. So the budget's up minimally.
Well, I mean, to me, that's not flat. I mean, that's, you know, could be
No,
substantial.
I said this particular budget was flat.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for the information.
Mr. DeFelice.
Mr. Moderator, could we get an explanation as to why we need an assistant procurement officer? I don't understand how this particular budget is flat when we're adding a new position for some $58,000. So my first question is, why do we need this position? Are we doing a lot more procuring?
I would defer to the town manager on that.
Again, this is not a new position. This is a position that existed in previous budgets, split between more than one department, and their primary function was purchasing. We have a centralized purchasing department, and from a management perspective, that position needed to be moved out of the various departments where it was and moved into the procurement office. It is not a new position, as Mr. Hill indicated.
Well, according to the packet that Mr. Hill gave me a little bit earlier, it doesn't show that position in the 2014 budget, so it's an additional amount in the procurement department.
Again, Mr. DeFelice, you need to read the notes to the budget. The notes to the budget explain it. It is not a new position. It is a position that was found elsewhere and has now been brought into the purchasing department where it belongs.
Mr. Hill showed me that, excuse me, the chart. I guess they took various amounts of monies out of various departments. So if we go back into those various departments, have some of the positions, salaries been reduced by that amount that came in to this spot?
The simple answer is yes, and they weren't really in various departments. They were in various divisions of the Public Works Department.
So they all came out of Public Works?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Again, I think the way we've always done this, I don't think any of us expected that we're reading a Dickens novel where we had to go to footnotes for explanations of terms we're unfamiliar with. Thank you.
Mr. Soros.
Joe Soers, Precinct 2. I think what I heard from a former speaker, past speaker, something about this format is not going to be the same format that we are going to be using next year. Did I hear that correctly? So this format is the format that's going to stay from now until the end of time. Thank you.
Mr. Murphy.
Reading the footnotes, the second line, it says this position of purchasing agent in the centralized purchasing department has been moved to a new department. It received a 12% increase to $81,520 due to being What's that? You get a new office, you get a 12% increase in pay? Is that through you, Mr. Moderator, to the town manager?
Mr. Hartman.
The town has a compensation and classification system, and that is what this position is rated at.
So, let me ask you this then. Is that the same person that was doing
No.
it?
No. There was an incumbent who retired.
So this job was posted on the outside?
Correct.
Thank you.
I've seen there being no further discussion on the procurement department for $151,027.96. All those in favor say aye. Aye. It's 99, I can't read mine. It's voted. Anybody opposed? No. Yeah, I've heard. The motion is carried. Department on page 38, centralized purchasing. 38. Mr. Hill.
$211,900.
Is there any discussion on the amount of 211? Mrs. Ayers.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, to anybody who can answer the question, why is centralized purchasing and the one that we just did two different things? Shouldn't this one be zeroed out if we have a new one that does the same thing? Thank you.
Mr. Hartman.
The purchasing budget that just passed is the people who do the purchasing. This budget that's currently under consideration are the goods and services they purchase townwide. And in the future, we may consider combining the two of them, but for purposes of clarity, we split the two.
There being no further discussion on the amount of $211,900 for centralized purchasing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Is there doubt in the mind of the chair? Does anybody want to challenge? Then I will declare it a vote. It's voted. You didn't want to stand. 7 people didn't want to challenge it. I don't want somebody coming back to reconsider something. Page 39, assesses.
$306,396.16.
Is there any discussion? Mr. Dolinsky.
George Dolinsky, Precinct 2. On the supplemental sheet that we received, anybody has this one? The assessor's budget salary total is $272,521.16, and in the book it says $274,521.16. Only a matter of $2,000, but which number is correct?
There's a $2,000 stipend in there for the board members. That is not a salary item.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, what's on here, what was asked for was by position, the salaries, not the overtime, not the longevity, and other items that may actually be under the heading of employees in the budget. These are just the salaries.
Right, and that's all I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the second line down that says longevity. I'm just saying the salary number is different by the 2,000. You're
Right,
saying
and-
that's a stipend.
Yeah, and as Mr. Hill says, the members of the Board of Assessors do in fact receive a financial stipend, and we do report that as salary.
And the next time, if we do the sheet, once again, next year, I would suggest that be indicated.
Pat?
I just wanted to follow up on that. When I got the salary breakout, that's the first thing I did is I compared the salary spreadsheet to the budget, and that's also in the notes. For most of the departments, the numbers are going to match. For some departments, police is a perfect example. There are things that are, I'm calling them salary-related expenses for lack of a better term. There are things related to salary, court time, overtime, nighttime differential, that go into the employee number in your book, but they're not really in a person's base salary. Those are the items that I realized were the differences between the worksheet you have and the budget. So I did, in the case of the assessors, it's the three-man board of assessors. Those aren't really employees with a salary, so they weren't on there as a sheet, but it was a $2,000 difference. So we did identify every employee line item versus the positions, and anything different was noted in there. So again, most departments, they're going to be the same. Police and fire and a little bit in DPW, like sick leave buyback, things like that. They're related to salaries, but they're not a person's base pay, I guess is the best way to explain that.
Mr. Dolinsky, since that was a reply.
Just for transparency, I think it should be, if we're going to work with a supplemental sheet, anything that's related to the salary line item should be, in my opinion, reflected in the supplemental sheet and in the book, so all the numbers match, and this way we don't have to have people like myself coming up asking questions about the salaries. That's all, very simple.
Mr. Crimmins.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name's still the same. I haven't moved, so everything's the same. Question on, I heard the S word mentioned a moment ago, stipend. I thought, I was told previously by various people in various contexts that we were eliminating stipends in our budget. Are we or are we not eliminating stipends through you, Mr. Moderator, to either the town manager or whomever can respond?
Mr. Hardeman.
We are, in fact, eliminating stipends as much as we can for employees. On the other hand, for certain elected officials, as like is the case of the moderator, under state statute, that's the call of the town meeting, not the budget process.
Okay, I understand that answer as it relates to the town moderator.
It also applies to the Board of Assessors.
It does.
And it would, in fact, apply to the selectmen or the planning board if they got a stipend. They do not.
And that's by state statute, you're saying that the Board of Assessors received that through you, Mr. Moderator?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I need to clarify, Barry, that it's not, the amount is not determined by the statute. The amount is determined by town meeting.
Could I ask one question on that same basic subject? It might come up later. Are we still paying a stipend for our registrars of voters? Or maybe I'm out of order to ask that. I know the state statute does provide for paying registrars.
To my knowledge, I don't believe we do, Mr. Moderator. I don't believe it was in last year's budget either.
Maybe that's appropriate at a different time. Okay. Anyhow, the moderator's out of order for asking that question, but it's a stipend question. Okay. On the assessor's budget, $306,396.16. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I declare it a vote. Page 40, information systems. Mr. Hill.
$279,509.
Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I'll declare it a vote. We go to 41, Town Clerk's budget.
$326,607.61.
Let me, three, wait a minute, I'm looking, which page am I looking at? 41. 326, 607
And 61 cents.
and 61 cents. At this time, Mr. Mullen.
No, I don't know what it is.
I remind you that the only people who are taking a voice vote are the people in these sections. If I hear anyone up back, you'll be asked to leave the meeting.
Just a short recess.
There's no motion here. This is just a data sheet.
Okay, we're back in session. Mr. Hill, could you read that again for us, please? Town Clerk.
Yes, sir. Town clerk budget, page 41, $326,607.61.
Is there a second? Second. Okay. All right, any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Hanson, you have a question on this one?
Actually, Howard Hanson, Town Moderator, since 1992 or something like that, back in the last century. And actually, the reason the Deputy Moderator asked whether I would like to speak on this is you will see that much of the moderator's budget has been incorporated into the clerk's department. And and I did have, actually, would it be appropriate to ask for a suspension so that we can talk about both budgets because we're the...
He's asking for Mr. Hansen's asking for a suspension of the rules. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Okay,
The rules
yeah.
have been suspended.
This is really an administrative situation. And it has, some things have not been included in some place or the other. And when I took office, and prior to taking office as moderator, I served as secretary to the Rules Committee under two previous moderators. And one of the biggest problems we had is that secretary was a volunteer secretary. I'm not saying that I did a good job or a bad job, because sometimes you're thrown into a job that you don't realize how critical it is until you get further up. And many of the documents that are now being required and enforced by state statute is all the proceedings of this town meeting and the standing committees are recorded, and we cannot borrow money when there's an appropriation or borrowing required unless we have a report from the standing committees. That's in the charter too. And now these things are even more timely since other rules have been put in. Now, this is no discredit to the current new town clerk. Her budget was prepared before she took office. My budget was prepared based on a different vision. There's also a stipulation in the charter that gives the town manager two things, authority. One is to prepare a budget, and I'm going to commend him for taking some initiative to try to make things a little more modern. But there's a few other things, and you all have alluded to it, one way or another. It's different. I'm going to say I did a few things different when I first became moderator. I had to learn to do them slowly. However, there's also another provision in the charter that says the town manager can organize and reorganize departments under his jurisdiction. Now, this becomes a very fuzzy thing, but if you see the town organization chart, the moderator is not part of the clerk's office. Now, there's some implication that things, a secretary isn't needed and would be volunteer. That really didn't work when I was a volunteer. And it's very lengthy to get reports. And we have been having a secretary for the Rules Committee and all the town meeting standing committees since 1993. We've been very fortunate that we've had the same secretary since 1994 who was graduated to become part of the Finance Committee. Last year, or this last season, yours truly played phantom clerk to the Rules Committee. And one evening, I really wasn't in very good health to even be sitting at the meeting, and my notes were not complete. Very lucky that the planning board had some minutes. So that's the problem you do run into when you're floating people around from different positions. I did submit a budget, and you have a copy of what I showed from last year. And that is based according to the current expenses, even the additional appropriations. Now, there's other things to be considered. I have to work with the clerk's office anyways, and the manager and the selectman's office. We all have a little bit that has to overlap and cooperate. So this isn't a contest between my authority, the clerk's authority, or the selectman's authority. We all have something stipulated in the general laws as to what we can do. And we're all trying to do it. However, I'm going to ask somewhere in the format that you do have to restore that position of a clerk specifically assigned to take care of the standing committee minutes and records. Last year, that amounted to actually a little less than what was appropriated, but a little more than what was, a little less than what was in the actuals here for 2013. However, that's what I'm at in this particular situation. There are a lot of logistics on this. I don't see where in-service training and education or dues and subscriptions sometimes interchanged. I am a member of the Massachusetts Moderated Association, which by our mutual contacts, many of these issues that come before town meeting, we resolve without having to pester our town council when we find out that somebody else has had the same problem and what works and sometimes what doesn't work. It's a very valuable association. Awards and presentations in my budget, you will see, has been moved to the Finance Committee, actually where that does belong. Office supplies and the other supplies, that has to be resolved. There are some immediate supplies that I have to do that are not going to be able to be done in the town hall. For your information, I got off my computer at 5 minutes of 7.
Mr. Hanson, I just want to remind you, you got less than 2 minutes, 2-minute warning.
Good. So that's where it stands on my comments on this, that some of this is going to have to be polished up as to understand how we're going to work it during the next year. However, I think the recommendations, the way they're in the Finance Committee report, for now, it should stand, and we'll see how they work during the year. But there's definitely going to have to be some things changed here, or an understanding where these things are paid for. So I want to thank you for tolerating me on this floor.
Mr. Murphy? Just want to remind everybody, we suspended the rules when we're talking and discussing the town clerk budget and also the town moderator's budget. And actually, Mr. Hill, could you just do the favor of just reading the town moderator's numbers?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
The town moderator's budget is $3,500.
Motion, it's been seconded. Did I hear a second? Second. All those in favor? Excuse me, sorry, we're discussing it right now, thanks. Little slip there. Mr. Murphy, go ahead, continue.
Through you, Mr. Deputy Monitor, to the town manager. Are the standing committees going to have a paid secretary next year?
Yes, it's in the town clerk's budget.
Where?
It's the $3,000 line item.
Will that be enough to cover all the time that the town clerk puts in?
It was originally proposed as $2,500. In their budget review, the Board of Selectmen upped it to $3,000 and felt that number would be adequate given expenditures in previous years.
But if need be, there's other money to pay for the additional time.
If needs be, the clerk has been advised that she will absorb it in her budget.
Okay. I'm not sure.
That's why it's in the clerk's budget.
I just wanted to be clear on this. during the public hearings, we have a secretary that comes in, and she takes down all the notes that we have. And she does a very good job at it, better than some people. Sorry, Howard. But what happens is, she then takes those notes, goes home, compiles them. She then sends them out to the department chairs, or the committee chairs. We then review them. And with the ones that I get back, I find very few mistakes. I mean, it's a clerical mistake or something like that, but her notes are very concise. From a legal standpoint, she does a very good job. This town owes her a big thank you. And to that, it would be a shame that if that position was not funded, and it should not be a volunteer position at all, ever, because legally, you need those notes to stand up if anything was to be questioned. As long as we have a paid secretary at those meetings, I'm in favor of this budget.
All right, thank you. At this time, Steve Mitchell.
Steve Mitchell, Precinct 8, Finance Committee member. I wanted to ask somebody at the town hall, now with the town moderator under the new budget, will he have an office at the town hall now that he can't do his work at his own office because he's not going to have the people there anymore? Anybody speak to that?
If I understood your question correctly, you want to know if Mr. Hanson has an office at Town Hall.
Will he have a new office first of the fiscal year? Yes.
He does not have an office at Town Hall.
He will not have one.
He does not have one now.
I know he doesn't have one now. He does his work out of his own business.
That is correct.
It sounds like we don't want him to do the work out of his own business. We want to do it at the clerk's office. So it would make sense to me that he would have an office at the clerk's office.
Now, again, to clarify, what is being discussed here is clerical services for the various committees, standing committees of town meeting. Previously, those have been financed out of the moderator's budget. If you note that last year they were financed at just under $2,000, at this year they are proposed to be financed at $3,000 in the clerk's budget.
I understand that, but before he contacted his secretaries directly, now he's going to have to go through either the clerk's office or wherever to get his secretaries. And I know that the secretary this year was, for the FinCom and probably for the other committees, was not well thought out by whoever thought it out, which I assume was you. We ended up getting the secretary that most of the other committees, standing committees, would use, and she did a good job of recording, but some of the information that we should have been getting in a timely manner before the meetings, we either got at the meetings or a lot of other things didn't go right.
If I can, Mr. Mullen, the statement that it was not well thought out is not a correct statement. The employee you're talking about accepted a promotion and created a vacancy for the FinCom position. And we have filled that vacancy between two employees. And I believe if you ask the chair of the FinCom, they've been quite satisfied with what they got.
Well, the 17 members, I'm not sure who, but the other 16, but I certainly was not happy.
Mr. Mitchell, please stay on scope. You know, we're just talking about the actual budget.
I think the scope is the moderator's office, and if standing committees are going to be able to get a good secretary, like the previous speaker said, which is very important, probably legally also. Don't forget now, we're all the town meeting members here. We spend all the money for the town. To cut corners on a few $1,000s, just so whatever's going on here, I'm not even going to make a guess of what's going on here, but I can tell you that things were not great at the Finance Committee. The recording secretary did a heck of a good job, but the rest of it was not that hot. So I'd like the things to go back to where they were. We're talking about not even pennies in the budget, and I think this is...
If I might,
I'm not
Mr.
sure
Moderator,
what's going on.
there's a misconception on Mr. Mitchell's part. There's been no change in staff for the committees. The lady that has been doing it did it. She did step in and take an extra load for the Finance Committee and therefore earned more money than she's traditionally earned. But there's been no change in staff.
Well, I don't know.
For the position that Mr. Hanson is talking about. It's the same person that has been doing it.
I don't know why I was not notified at certain times on a timely manner and did not get a lot of information ahead of time. I'm not sure whose fault that was, but it seems to have changed, and I don't like it. And I know a lot of other people on the standing committees are not happy with what's going on. This should have been well thought out before things get changed around. And I think it's ridiculous to be cutting this little amount of money. So this town meeting, which is not working very well at all this year, maybe can go back to working the way it's supposed to. Thank you.
All right, the town clerk would like to add a couple of things as privileged speaker.
I just wanted to clarify to the previous speaker that I don't have everyday dealings with the secretary. She works for Howie, and really the only thing that comes through is the payroll that she submits through my department. So I don't have day-to-day dealings with her.
All right, Mr. Mitchell, hang on. Let's not go back and forth about individual employees. We're talking about
I'm
the
not
budget.
talking about an employee. I'd like to just clarify
Okay.
what you said. Now, before Mr.
To the point, please.
The moderator could call his secretary anytime he wants, and he has to go through the, she may be the greatest person in the world. Who's the next one's going to be? And let's not make this any more complicated than we have to. Let's go back to making it simple.
Okay, next up is Mr. Bob Cohn. Just for everybody, all the members, your disability, you couldn't make it over here.
I have two bad hips.
Okay,
I just want you to
understandable.
know that, and I
All
take
right.
injections, and eventually they got to be taken care of.
I just want to
It's either
explain
going to
to
be done at the Baptist or the Mass General. I'll give you the doctors' names, too. And I think it's ridiculous for the people at this side to walk over there, too.
Well, we're just trying to maintain some order.
Uh,
Thank you, though. Go ahead.
I'm one of the standing committees, a chairman. And the last thing I got was, and the secretary we have is wonderful when she's there. A lot of times, the moderator was there taking notes, which he shouldn't be. I got 10 meetings to read in 3 days to pass back. So I very nicely gazed over them and did it. So if someone's telling me this is working, it isn't working. I had 32 articles. The municipal regulation had just happened to have 32 articles this year to do. And some of them were complicated, and we did them. But we should have a secretary there to do them. Because next year, if I'm back again and privileged to be the chairman, I'm going to adjourn the meeting, and you won't have the minutes. No secretary, no minutes. And I don't care what anyone's telling you. I sat there and I cheered, I wrote little notes down, but it's not my job. It's their job. She is a wonderful, wonderful secretary, but she's spread thin. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Ed D. Felice.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. Guess we're talking about also talking about the moderator's budget. We're doing both, I guess. So I guess my question is, under this new scheme, so let's see if we get this right, the town moderator is basically going to be reporting to the town clerk, is that correct?
The town moderator is an independently elected official and reports to no one but himself and town meeting. Nobody is going to report to the town clerk. The only change is that the clerical line item, number 1, has been increased, and number 2 has been moved to the town clerk's budget.
What about the issue of the moderator's salary versus stipend, I think it was? What's the deal on that?
The moderator, like the Board of Assessors, receives what is legally known as a stipend. It is not a salary.
but in fact, he has been
And
receiving a salary.
frankly, Ed, if you take a look at the number of hours Howard puts in, you're not paying him anywhere near minimum wage. That's why it's a stipend and not a salary.
For the number of hours that Mr. Hanson puts in, he should be making almost as much as you're making.
Well, that is the choice of the town meeting, not the town manager. Again, the salary of the moderator by statute is set by town meeting.
But isn't it a fact that the moderator has been receiving a salary over, I don't know how we would know, umpteen years? Isn't that-
I don't know, Ed, I wasn't here. I know that this year the FinCom has proposed, and you see it in your budget, to almost, to more than double the stipend.
So if we go from, I don't know if it's semantics, but if we go from a salary and we call it a stipend, how does that affect the individual's retirement with the Norfolk County Retirement Board, which he is a member of now? So if he no longer has a quote-unquote salary and he's going to a stipend, that means that we're destroying
If in
his
fact
retirement?
he is a member of Norfolk County Retirement, and his wages or stipend, salary, whatever you choose to call it, is reported, his pension will be based upon what he's paid, not what it's called. So, for example, the FinCom just more than doubled the proposed stipend. If town meeting approves it and Howard is involved as moderator for at least 3 more years, he's changed the amount of his pension. If in fact he has a pension coming, I don't know that he does or he doesn't. That's not an issue to me. The issue to me was that the clerical function belongs with the town clerk, not the moderator.
And what led to that decision on your part that it should be with the clerk and not traditionally as it has been? I mean, we're getting a lot of changes this year, and it seems that between not getting contracts done and having all this stuff going on here, why are we doing this?
All right, let's.
That's not germane, frankly.
I think it's very germane.
Mr. DeFelice,
Yes, sir.
your questions should pertain to the budgets here.
It does. We're talking about
Oh.
the town moderator and the amount of money that he's getting or not getting and why it's being altered or changed. It's very important.
Again, what the moderator is getting in terms of compensation has not been changed. It's been proposed to be increased. This body and this body alone controls what he gets. I don't control it. The Board of Selectmen does not control it. The Finance Committee does not control it. It's the exclusive prerogative of town meeting.
Of course, as is in every other budget. But why are we changing it? Why are we calling it a stipend? There's got to be a reason for that. Why are we doing that?
Again, for the last time, that's what it is. It is a stipend. It is not a salary.
Mr. DeFelice, let's please move on. Any
Okay,
other questions?
I think just for, reasons that were spoken by previous speakers, I think the moderator should be controlling. I mean, these various standing committees report to him, so doesn't it make sense that he should be doing as he always has been doing and controlling the secretaries? We heard a couple of people talk about how important those secretaries are to them. I think it makes sense to leave it with the moderator and not worry about whether or not the clerk has to find it somewhere in her budget if the amount that this $3,000 isn't enough. I don't know. Maybe it's resistance to change. I don't know. But I just think it's been working for, God knows, 30 years. I think he's been doing a great job. Why are we screwing with it? Thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Paul Smith, Precinct 7. A little earlier, we were talking about this $3,000 line item in here, and I can't find it. I wonder where, in here. This is what we're talking about.
Into the microphone, Mr. Smith.
This is what we're talking about, the budget. You mentioned a $3,000 line item in this budget? I don't see it.
Actually, the rules were suspended, and you're talking about this budget and the moderator's budget.
Okay.
which is the next page.
So,
Turn the page, it's on, moderator's budget's on 42.
It's actually 3,500.
Next page, 42.
there's no $3,000 line
And the
item.
Finance Committee has proposed moving the moderator's stipend from $1,400 a year to $3,500.
No, you mentioned earlier there was a line item in here for $3,000 that was moved, and I don't see it.
That's in the clerk's budget, and it's
I have the
under,
clerk's budget here, it's not there.
Hold on.
Yeah, but
Mr. Smith, Mr. Smith, what's your question now? You don't see
The
the,
question is, the town manager mentioned a $3,000 line item in the town clerk's budget, and I don't see it. That's the question. Where is it?
no, you have to look here.
what? All right, we're gonna get a little explanation. Hang on one second, please, everybody.
We got an answer yet?
Yeah. Mr. Smith, the town clerk's coming down just to show you where that number is.
A salary, and when you look at this, with the breakdown of the salaries, you've got clerical salaries, moderator. So it's actually in the employee's salaries, but then you look and that's the salary.
Those numbers don't match. Employee salary. They don't match.
Well, that you can ask.
So
Because
she
that
agrees they
probably
don't
has-
match.
No, what I'm saying is this is probably like.
All right, let's
increases in
continue, Mr.
salary
Smith.
Are going to be July 1st, because they'll get step raises and so forth. So it's going to be a little different, because this is just salaries. It doesn't include the step raises that people may get.
So there
or
is,
cost
so
of
there is
living.
no $3,000 line item that he
There
mentioned.
is, right there, in salaries. This is the broken down salaries, but this number's different because it doesn't include step raises. That's why this number's more, because it doesn't include the step
These
raises.
numbers don't match these numbers.
They do, but this includes people's step raises as of July 1st, and any kind of cost of living increases they get
see what
when
he's
the
talking
unions
about.
settle their
All right.
contracts.
And we ran into
This
that
is
when
just
we
the bare
reconciled
bones
this whole thing.
salary. This doesn't include
Every
anything
department.
else. This is just with nothing
Okay,
else
all
in
right,
it.
okay.
Just
So
one
it is-
second, please.
There
All
is
right.
an actual line
Can a
item.
town
So-
clerk?
So it's smoke and mirrors.
Amy?
No, it's not. It's
Excuse
not.
me.
This is the bottom
All right, let's,
line, because this will
The
include.
bottom lines don't
one
match.
second.
I'm
Amy,
telling you.
please. I think Mr. Smith. I did, for a quick explanation. My apologies. Now, the question you had was, where's the $3,000 line item budget for the previous clerk? Is that, you want to ask the town manager that?
No, he's the one that brought it up.
Okay, is that in the budget right now or not? It is. Okay, it's in the salaries.
And this is the
It is
budget,
included
correct?
in this book,
One person, please. Let the town manager explain
but
one
it
more
is
time.
not independently identified. You have to look at this sheet
Okay.
where it's independently identified.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. I was asking the answer. We're voting on the book, page 42 and 41. All right, Mr. Smith, any other questions?
No, I'll probably get the same answer, so, you know, BS is BS.
All right. Lori Gover?
Laurie Gover, Precinct 3, move the question.
All right. That is cutting off debate for both budgets, page 41 and 42, the town clerk budget and the town moderator's budget. We will vote them separately. All those in favor of cutting off debate, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, declare that a vote. Debate is cut off. Okay, on the town clerk's budget, voting the bottom line of $326,607.61. That's the town clerk's budget. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? I declare that a vote. It passed. Page 42, town moderator's budget. We're voting on the bottom line, $3,500. This is the town moderator's budget on page 42. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, declare that as passed as a vote. Right now, we'll do a quick recess.
Mr. Hill, page 43, planning.
$160,998.02.
Can we round up? Numbers. Any discussion on planning? Since there's no discussion on it, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Department 44.
$101,311.11.
That's for the Conservation Commission. I just want to make sure I get it recorded. 101-31111. Play that number. Any discussion on the Conservation Commission budget? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. Department 45, Board of Selectmen.
$18,030 even.
Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. Department 46, Human Resources.
$174,085.10.
Do you want to speak? Okay, there's somebody there. Mr. Lurie? Yeah. All right. Mr. Cohen first.
It seems on 14 under employees, 1.5, we paid 87,787, just to round the figures off. This year we have 2.5 at 166,010. That's a lot of money. When we put this position in, the famous words of one of my colleagues said, "Wait and see, we're going to keep adding." And here it is, 2 years later, we're adding to this position. What bothers me with this position is, I think the man is overworked, or the person's overworked, because he does so many chores, runs departments, negotiates contracts, which, by the way, we haven't signed many of the big ones. There's just so many things the man does. Pretty soon I'm going to be buying him a Superman thing to put on the back of his shirt, because he works miracles. The clerk leaves. Oh, the human resource man takes care of the clerk's office. No experience, just go in and take care of the clerk's office. We'll do that. What I'm saying is, contracts are a mess. Employees from out of town are in this town. We have a residency law in this town, and I feel that the personnel that works in this town are being, I don't know how to spray it, but They get 3 weeks vacation. We have people coming in getting 3 weeks vacation. I was there at 9 o'clock one morning, and the only person that was there was the town manager's secretary. 9 o'clock in the morning. What is going on here? And it bothers me to see all these out-of-towners coming in here. I see one person moved in, and I don't see no one else. The people that work at this town hall and work for these departments in this town live here, pay taxes, and spend money in this town. And that's all I want to say, folks. This is a department I hope is looked at in the near future. Thank you.
Mr. Lurie.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dave Lurie, Precinct 6. Very early in town meeting this year, there was a healthy debate going on about the integrated software that we bought. It was $750,000. We were told it was going to do miracles for our town, the communication between departments, the efficiencies we were going to get, all kinds of long-term fluid government, very, reduced headcount. On the other hand, we heard earlier tonight, we're only getting an increase in headcount of about 2.34, 2.5, some modest number of increase in headcount. This department's asking, from what the math, I heard math a moment ago, the math I came up with when I had to cross-reference to last year's book to try to match that to this year's book, came up with $80,519 increase. Does that match? Okay. So what is it? The software that we just sunk $750,000 into that's going to create all this efficiency, that we actually have to increase the management and operational requirements of the town to help with a 2-point-something increase in headcount? What on earth is going on? $750,000 for software that's supposed to solve problems, but we have to add personnel that's supposed to help us with personnel. It doesn't add up. I don't understand how you could sink that much money and have your headcount be so minuscule, but apparently that puts such a demand on HR that we have to actually add an $80,000 a year position for. I don't get it. I will not be voting in favor of this, and it's absurd. I don't know where this future rainbow of glorious operational, panacea is going to, everybody's going to be, world hunger will be solved. Who knows? I mean, the amount of money that we're asking to sink into this is utterly ridiculous. I hope you all vote no. Thank you.
Mr. Crimmins.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Barry Crimmins, Precinct 4. Through you, to whomever can answer, I have a couple of questions on. I've seen now throughout the budget this new, or what appears to be a new title of Program Administrator. And I have some questions on what that position is. And in this particular case, it refers to Program Administrator 2 Confidential. So is there a Program Administrator 1 position? Is there a Program Administrator position that is not confidential? Can somebody answer those questions for me, Mr. Moderator?
If I might.
Mr. Hartman.
The town currently has Program Administrator 1s. None of them presently are confidential. Whether or not they're confidential is a function of what they do. What we're talking about doing is converting the current position of payroll clerk into a Program Administrator 2. And since that person deals with sensitive information that frequently is used in the collective bargaining process, the proposal is to make that position confidential in accordance with the statutes of the Commonwealth.
If I may, Mr. Moderator, through you to ask a follow-up question. So when the position is defined as confidential, what does that mean from a practical standpoint in terms of the person performing their duties? What can they do or can they not do by virtue of that classification?
The only change that that classification would result in is that that person could not be a member of a union.
Could not be a member of a union.
Correct.
Okay. So is there such a position of program administrator 2 that might not be confidential, or does the number 2 refer to the confidentiality aspect?
No, the number 2 refers to the complexity of the position in terms of the work performed, as well as the educational requirement to come in and the experiential requirement. And it's quite possible that there could be program administrator 2s that are not confidential.
Okay. And so this is a position that we did not have in our current FY14 budget. So is this a position that's going to be advertised as and a new hire, or is somebody within the department simply being reclassified as this under this title?
That has not been determined. It is not a new position. It is a position that's being converted to this position. And I can't predict what the incumbent will do or not do.
Converted from what, if I may, Mr. Moderator, through
I think the current title is payroll clerk.
Okay. If I could ask a question on the line principal clerk, which is, again, at least according to the summary sheet that we were handed, is not in the FY14 budget and is being budgeted for FY15 at $43,000 and change. Was there not a clerical person in that office for FY14?
There was a person in that office for a short period of time, but she is now deceased.
Okay. But I mean, did we not have a budgeted item for FY14?
No, the principal clerk was moved in a reorganization sometime around the first of the year to the personnel or the HR department from the town accountant's office.
Okay. So,
And that person has subsequently died, and that position is currently vacant,
okay.
but is proposed to be filled in the new budget. And I do need to clarify, the position program administrator is a position that's within a union, and we would have to petition the state to make the position confidential.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, please?
You asked about the position of program coordinator. That is currently a position that belongs to a bargaining unit. But we have the right, given what the person's duties are, to petition the state to make the position a confidential position and thereby non-union. So that's what we will be doing.
When you say
It doesn't mean we'll be successful with the petition, but that's what we are proposing.
When you say petition the legislature, does that mean it does not have to be approved by the union to take
No,
that?
not petition the legislature, but I petition the Department of Labor, the labor relations folks
Oh,
in
okay.
Boston.
Okay. But
They determine whether or not there's a community of interest for a group of employees and whether or not an employee is confidential or not.
Okay. Okay. So if I can ask the follow-up question, if you were successful with that petition, does that mean that the union does not have to approve taking that position out of the union?
Well, this is the current position that we're talking about modifying is also a union position. And through a reorganization, the town has an obligation to bargain not the reorganization, but the impact thereof. So if your question is, do we have to talk with the unions? The answer is yes, we have an obligation to bargain impact. Reorganization itself is not negotiable. It's an inherent management right.
Okay. Thank you. If I could ask perhaps a somewhat more macro question now. So under that, the office presently has the HR director and how many other employees in it? And obviously then the follow-up to that would be, in the FY15 budget, what would be the number of positions in that office?
To oversimplify, the office presently has 2 employees, but one is a vacant position. That would be the position of principal clerk. What is proposed is to take the existing payroll clerk's position, convert it to a program coordinator, and that position would be shared 0.5 with the treasurer collector, and in the budget that was approved for the treasurer collector, that 0.5 is there, and the other 0.5 would be assigned to HR.
Okay. And I guess the last question has to do,
And make it 2.5.
it says the HR director received a 5.08% increase in this budget. It is essentially a double step, a 2.5% increase for filling in as the town clerk during that vacancy, and a 2.5% increase in keeping with the steps on the grid. So I'm confused about the rationale of the double step. As I understand it, we now have a town clerk, so in FY15, the HR director will not be performing the duties of town clerk. So why are we giving a double step increase in FY15 for ostensibly a position that was performed in FY14 but is not going to be performed by the HR director in FY15?
I think it's a double step relative to what was budgeted in FY14. The arrangement that this individual employee made with the Board of Selectmen when they appointed him acting town clerk, and he was acting town clerk for a significant period of time, was that instead of additional wages for serving as town clerk, the board and this employee agreed to a one-step increase. And of course, that increase carries forward. So that's why it looks like double, but there's only one step for fiscal 15 in accordance with what most town employees who have collective bargaining agreements that have been settled or are non-union are receiving.
Okay. But in essence, therefore, what we did was we built in an increase in the base salary that will continue going forward for duties that were only performed on a one-time basis, correct?
That is, in fact, what the Board of Selectmen agreed to with this individual, yes.
Interesting. I'm going to get my soapbox for 1 second before I get ruled out of order and just say this. I wish some of these people...
You got 1 minute to go.
Thank you. I won't need it all. I wish some of these people who are involved in some of these budgets that we are discussing, and specifically this budget that we are discussing, including the folks who evidently gave this double-step increase, would spend as much time and effort resolving the union contracts that are long outstanding as they have in these budgets. Thank you.
Mr. DeFelice, Mr. Fitzgerald, you guys switch seats.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dick Fitzgerald, Precinct 3. I'll be very brief. We stood here several years ago. Previous speaker had mentioned this, and we put in a position for human resources. What are the duties that are being done and performed by this position right now? Oh, okay. I guess that answers the question. It's very insulting. The previous speaker just said this, and obviously there's the proof. It's very insulting that we have personnel who have dedicated themselves to this town, have worked for this town for a great number of years, and contracts can't get settled. I'm going to come back up here when we get to the police budget and when we get to the fire budget, because I have several questions about those. I don't think they'll be answered, obviously. But that's all well and good. The problem is that I have one question now. The Human Resource Director, as the previous speaker had stated, is now locked in as a salary for through the clerk's office. I'm questioning, is there also a position through the for the Human Resource Director as an acting town manager? Was that ever appointed by the Board of Selectmen? To you, Mr. Hartman.
I don't think I understand your question.
Let me put it very simply.
Are you asking?
Do you
that
have
we-
an assistant, is there an assistant town manager right now in the town of Stoughton?
No, there is
Acting?
not.
Is there an acting position for an assistant town manager?
No.
No. So if you're not there, who fills in?
Whatever department head I choose, that's what the charter says. The charter says that if it's an appointment that lasts less than 21 days, the manager has the right to name a department head.
Who would you name?
As acting manager.
Who would you name right now
I
if you
have-
weren't going to be there tomorrow for the next 21 days?
It would be Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I'll be back up with the police and fire.
Mr. DeFelice. Okay, Mr. Souza.
David Spanky Souza, Precinct 4. A few years ago, you guys voted for a human resource town meeting, guys. I'm the new guy, I'm not town meeting or nothing. But you guys can control him to get rid of his budget. Thank you.
Mr. DeFelice.
Mr. Moderator, through you to the town manager. Who's our current labor council?
Mr. Hartman.
Mr. Fair is both Labor Council and Town Council.
Okay.
And I guess for the record, in terms of what Mr. Fitzgerald had said, he has been doing the negotiation for more than a year now, not the
And-
Human Resources Director.
My understanding, however, is that the HR person has been involved in some of the negotiations. I don't know if he's been involved in all of them, but I understand he's been involved in some. So we're talking about HR. We're talking, no.
Yeah.
Follow the
Let the
ball,
speaker
you'll see.
speak.
At present, the HR Director sits in on negotiations. But since we've entered into formal negotiations, Mr. Fair has been the exclusive negotiator for the town, and that has been the case for at least the last 13 months.
Question on the double step, or the two-step, I guess, is what we're seeing a lot of here tonight. So that 2.5%, that would go into that line item budget basically forever, right?
Say again, Ed, I don't think I understand.
Now, he got this 2.5% for filling in for the clerk. So that elevates his salary to that position, right? So that is like a permanent increase in his salary.
That is correct. As I said earlier, that was the nature of the agreement with the
So
selectmen.
why did we do that? Why didn't you give him a stipend?
The reality is I didn't have any part in it. The appointment to an acting town clerk position was the Board of Selectmen's, and the Board of Selectmen at that time determined to do it the way they did it.
Well, my question would be to the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, why did we do that versus a stipend?
Ed, TJ can get up, but he wasn't here. He wasn't chairman at the time.
How about a former, Mr. O'Regan perhaps, he was a former member? The question basically was, when the person filled in for the clerk, why was that given as an increase in salary basically that goes on forever versus a stipend, which would have been like a one-shot payment for doing that extra work? And I know you had no part of it, but I'm just
No, I was actually on the board at the time. You're asking, if I understand your question correctly, when we had a need for an acting town clerk, why did we treat his compensation for that position as we did the what was the percentage? Excuse me.
My point is, I guess, that if it were...
Let me try it, and I
Okay.
can't...
Thank you.
I can't put words in the mouth of the board, but essentially, what the 2.5% totaled was $40 a week. And given what they would have had to pay in terms of a stipend for being acting town clerk, it would have been probably in the vicinity of 4.5 to 5 years worth of what he ended up getting. So during the time he was acting town clerk, you know, he got the 2.5%. He got it going forward. That was the arrangement. I think probably in the minds of the board, they felt that was a cheaper arrangement.
Okay.
Because it would have been a period of probably 4 or 5 years before the two numbers would catch up. And I think there was probably an assumption, I'm not going to get into how old people are, but there was an assumption he wouldn't be here in 4 or 5 years.
The other thing I'm really concerned about, and I think a previous speaker also mentioned it, and that's the fact that we're lighting up this department. I want to know why we're adding these 2 additional positions.
I'm sorry, but I was discussing something with the budget coordinator.
Oh.
Can you please repeat
Yeah,
that again?
I said I'm concerned about lighting up this department with these 2 additional positions. I don't understand it. We're not getting, I mean, many of these people that work for us, you know, they're still waiting to get increases, and we're I think everybody can see tonight by just looking at what's been going on in the budget. Look at the department heads, and look, with all due respect, look at them. Look what they're making. Look at how top-heavy our government is. And then we got employees that are looking to get raises, and they're like, hey, we don't have enough money.
About another minute.
So it's an important issue. Why we got these added positions here?
I would answer it this way. We pay people in the management of this town and management of departments. They come up with budgets. The budgets go through a full vetting throughout all of December, January, on up till tonight. We take recommendations from them, and we decided long ago and long before I decided to be on the Board of Selectmen, foolish or not, to be a strong town manager form of government, that we take the advice of the people we hire and the Board of Selectmen and the boards that sit in elected positions in this town, we discuss policy. So when it comes back to us, the policy of a budget, we take their advice, we weigh it, as does the FinCom. Different analysis for sure, but if they're saying the efficient operation of this town requires 2.5 positions, however allocated, I ask questions, they come before our board, we all do a full vetting of that budget, and in the end, we vote the amount. And the amount gets allocated in the day-to-day operations. We don't micromanage, and I never will, the day-to-day operations of the town. So when you say, why do we have 2.5 employees in that department? The shorter answer is because the people we've hired and say that we need those positions for the efficient operation of the town recommended that, and we agreed. Now, if you're disagreeing, I'd like to hear why, other than we're paying a lot of people. What's the bottom line amount of the budget? If you don't agree with that, that can change tomorrow.
The reason I'm concerned again is that we're creating all these positions, all these management positions, and we're not taking care of the people where the rubber meets the road. I mean, we got people that school doesn't have a contract, the fire, the police.
May I please? Because I've heard that several times.
Yeah, I mean,
I have worked tirelessly as chairman, as has every member of this board, on trying to resolve budget issues. So if I hear one more time that we're not doing it, as if we're all sitting at home watching television when we should be negotiating contracts, and people from the unions, who I've spoken with personally, will know this. We've spent an endless amount of time trying to resolve these things. I speak to each one of these selectmen constantly during the week, and I'm not making money from that, but I'm discussing how other people will make money, and Honest to God, if I could snap my fingers and make everything resolved tomorrow, I would. I will promise everybody who works for this town and is in a union or is not, that they'll be fairly treated by the Board of Selectmen and the employees of the Board of Selectmen. Because if they aren't, that's a policy matter, and that's what we'll address. So if there's an underlying problem here on this budget, I've told you my thoughts. I'll answer any specific questions. But if the question is that amount the proper amount? Tell us why it isn't. I might agree with you. Right now, the policy says that's the right amount.
Well,
thank you.
The policy might say that, but I think a lot of us don't feel that the job is getting done. Let me just drop that.
That's fair, by the way.
All right, and that's...
Tell me how. And
Not only my
Mr.
feeling, but I think it's a
DeFelice.
feeling a lot. But let's put that aside.
Mr. DeFelice,
Yeah, we'll put
time
that
is
aside.
running out.
But I do have a specific question perhaps you could answer. Have we got the job descriptions? Has that been done yet?
I believe that's in process, but I defer that to the town manager.
I thought when we
Mr.
talked about hiring an
DeFelice.
HR person, it was,
Mr.
one of the primary
DeFelice.
things was to have that done. I think that...
Mr. DeFelice,
Yes, sir.
you've gone well over your
Thank you.
stated time. Mr. Feaster.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Joseph Feaster, Precinct 4. I rise to speak on this particular matter because I think this body needs, and the folks who are viewing on television need to have a little historical reference on the reason for this position. My predecessor as town manager, Frank Crimmins, was the one who put in place a personnel policy for this town. Prior to Frank, and as far as I understand it, prior to Frank Crimmins, there was no personnel policy that was in place. There was nothing which went as far as people's management of either their sick time, vacation time, or the like. So Frank Crimmins put in place a process for that, and in fact, I believe hired the first human resources person for this town. And if anyone has a history different than that, please correct me. When I came as an interim town manager and building upon what Frank Crimmins had started, because one of the things those of us who are in the private sector fully understand that there's a need for managing employees, and it's sad that this process about the human resource position is being discussed in the midst of collective bargaining. So let me just put this in context so that people understand where I came from. One, I was president of a union, the National Labor Relations Board Employees Union, so I stand with unions. When I was head of the Housing Authority, I negotiated with 7 unions. So I believe in fairness in terms of employees having the rights to have what they have. But again, I've been on management side, and there's a negotiation that has to take place. We need to stay out of that process, we here in town, because that's what I'm hearing tonight. That's what we're addressing, is our personal feelings relative to the collective bargaining. But back to the question of the reason for the human resources position. I will also, for full disclosure, because I'm prepared to defend any action I've taken, will take in the future. I hired Jamie Kelly. I hired him through a process where I used the department heads, in fact, the heads of the unions, in order to select the person for human resources. And through that process, we came up that Mr. Kelly was the best candidate for that particular job. We also understood, following and building upon what Manager Crimmins had started, was that we had to put in place a policy for dealing with personnel matters. So we passed the personnel bylaw. We passed the issues of trying to get the proper process for it so employees can get a determination with clarity as to what they would be getting, whether there were step increases or whatever the case might be. So we have put in place a process, and this discussion about the position. Now let me just also clarify so people will know. There is not a addition to this particular department except maybe the principal clerk's position or the change to the program administrator to confidential position. it has always been the case where a person in the Treasurer's Department, and I believe it was the payroll clerk, was splitting their time working with the HR director, both under Manager Crimmins and under myself as interim town manager. So there's no change in that process. But again, this discussion went on not within the context of collective bargaining going on. So folks need to, if folks are concerned about how our town is being managed, if folks are concerned that there's a level of unfairness, let's not try to place it in this position here because we have a person who we've hired who understands collective bargaining, who understands personnel and management issues, and let the process forward through the town manager, through the Board of Selectmen, through the school committee, work on the collective bargaining. Let's not spend a whole lot of time here trying to dissect the individual as opposed to looking at the need for the position in this particular town. Thank you.
Mr. Roth.
Hi, John Rock, Precinct 3. I guess I want to echo the previous speaker, Mr. Feaster, and the chair of the Selectmen, Mr. Recupero. I find this discussion very frustrating and maddening. Of course this town needs a human resource department. There are 230 employees on the town side. I mean, it would be ridiculous not to have a human resource department. The town is an $81 million corporation. So I don't think, I don't know how you can argue that there's no need for a human resource department. And my feeling is there's a lot of misplaced anger going on here directed towards certain individuals. We're trying to get through the budget. We're never going to get through the budget if we question every little thing. Look, if you don't like the way the town's run, elect new selectmen who can hire a new town manager who can then hire different people. But until then, let them do their job. You know, I don't agree with everything they do, but stop micromanaging their job. This budget has been thoroughly vetted through lots of processes. I'm on the FinCom. I went to countless meetings, subcommittee meetings. You know, I mean, you don't have to take my word for it, but for God's sakes, let's stop arguing about $3,000 here and there and little nitpicky little things. Let them run the town. If you don't like it, elect new selectmen.
That's to cut off debate. All those in favor of cutting off debate, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the motion carries to cut off debate. On the motion, which is page 46, account number, title, Human Resources, $174,085.10. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. There's doubt in the mind of the chair. All those in favor, please rise and the chairman take account. Precinct 1. 3. Precinct 1 is 3. Precinct 2. 14. Precinct 2 is 14. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 7. Precinct 4. 15. Precinct 4 is 15. Did I hear? I have a problem in Precinct 3. Precinct 9 stands corrected. And Precinct 3, the number is 9. 4 is 15, is that correct? Yes. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 12. Precinct 6. 10. Precinct 6 is 10. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 7. Precinct 8. 6. Precinct 8 is 6. All those opposed, please rise. Chairman, take count. Precinct 1 is 7. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 2. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 5. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 2. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 2. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 6. Precinct 7. 4 and 1. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 5. The motion carries. Yes, 76, no, 33, 1 abstention. 76 yes, 33 no, 1 abstention. At this time, I'd like to explain the request and what is the procedural motion regarding to reassign or transfer appropriations in this budget. And the motion first is to act on the account from where the funds are to be taken. And the motion is to state the reason for the reduction. Once that motion on that sum is acted upon, which is to reduce that department's amount of appropriation, any other changes in that department will be considered. And then the motion made to vote the bottom line as adjusted, if it is adjusted. No further action will be allowed on that budget. Make that very clear. Once you've opened a budget and altered it down or up, whatever way you're choosing to do it, you're not coming back to pick at it again. It's once. Then the motion on the account where the funds are to be added or transferred to is made to add a dollar amount to a specific account, and the stated purpose is voted. All other debate on that account is also to be considered, and then the final vote on the department bottom line is voted. No further action will be allowed on that budget either. You're getting 2 chances to do it in each place. Now, we have a motion coming from Mrs. Camacho. Would you? Okay. No.
Page
This
47.
has to be done before FinCom. Yes, as soon as I find the right page. No, I need my page. That's why. I had to slip a page in my workbook here. On the engineering account, before, now you got the information, you can think about that.
Page 47,
Yes, engineering. Mr. Hill.
$333,506.57.
Is there any discussion? This is now strictly on the engineering account. We haven't made any of those other motions yet. Let's just explain how to do it and why it has to be done sometime at this point. On the engineering department budget, there being no further discussion or no discussion at all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the motion carries. Now, Mrs. Camacho. You come to the microphone. Mr. Cohn. No, I am in charge of this, and if we start moving around without those kind of motions, following this procedure, we're going to be in more trouble than we did in the other part of it. Mrs. Camacho, Roberta. Roberta. You just want. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I believe we're going to page 78. On page number 78, this is the FY 2015 School Department budget, Stoughton Public Schools. I move to decrease the total school department budget by $863,000, making the new total school department budget $40,167,150.
And
Or
don't
take,
put your period right there. You're taking that in.
all right, thank you.
Okay, you may explain why you're doing that. No, this is because it's part of the motion. Mrs. Camacho, continue. Just briefly saying what the purpose of this move is. No, I had recognized Mrs. Camacho. She's still making the motion. No. Mrs. Camacho.
All right, I've made the motion, and it's my responsibility now to explain why I made the motion. The reason that I made the motion is the same motion that I made at the Finance Committee. The $863,000 comes from the following sources. $160,000 was the money that was allocated one way or another, and it's explained in the handout that was prepared by Mrs. Coburn and was handed out, and it was explained on pages 3 and 4. So you had that to read since Monday night. So that's in the 2014 budget. $703,000 is for the new positions that were listed in this handout that we were given with the Finance Committee handbook. And that is on page number 7 in that handout. This handout came with your Finance Committee handbook and was incorporated thereof. The reason for my motion is the following. The $160,000 was either a clerical mistake or the explanation that is here from Mrs. Coburn on the Finance Committee. And no one seems to know what to do with it. The $703,000 is for the new positions. There has been a hiring freeze placed on the new positions. So therefore, leaving $863,000 in the school department budget, I do not believe is a wise thing to do. Now, I understand that the other night at the school committee meeting, it was voted by the school committee at the request of the superintendent to use the $160,000, which was allocated either one way or another, either through miscalculation or whatever, but it was extra money that was going to be used for salary increases. And there was $320,000 that was a 1% increase. That was $480,000 that was voted on the 17th last night by the school committee to return that money, to instruct the superintendent to return that money to the town of Stoughton. Now, the superintendent does not need that instruction or that vote. She may do it on her own. However, having been criticized last year, I believe she asked for that vote so she would have the vote of the school committee and have the backing of the school committee. However, the fiscal year does not end until June 30th. Looking at a budget, I do not believe it financially responsible. I have been a member of this town meeting for 34 years. I have never voted except for what I think is in the right and good interest financially of the town of Stoughton, whether it be a zoning bylaw, a salary, or whatever it happened to be in our budget. It doesn't make any difference to me to what association you belong to, what union you belong to, what department you belong to. I vote how I think is financially responsible because I raised my hand and took an oath of office to do the best that I could. People don't like the way I vote, then vote me out of office in Precinct 4. Now, I don't think it's wise to leave $863,000 on the table in the school department budget. You have to remember the school department budget is a bottom line budget. The money in that budget we have no control over. That money can be used for anything. Those new hires never have to be made. The $160,000 can be used for something else. I would like to take that money out of the school department budget, and with the moderator's permission, I have in the next motion below, which I am not supposed to address at this point in time, where I would like to place that money. And I will address some of my concerns regarding that in a moment. Mr. Moderator, may I address one concern regarding where I would like to place that money?
Yes, since I asked you to do that.
I would like to place that money, the $863,000, as the motion says below, which I will not read at this time because I have not been given permission to read it. I would like to place it in the Finance Committee reserve. Now, I was told tonight that in the Finance Committee handbook, which I am well aware of and have read, that you cannot fund a contract after a town meeting using the Finance Committee reserve. That Finance Committee reserve, that money that's voted in there, would not be used to fund a contract. That money would be used when it was necessary, the superintendent of schools can request a transfer for any positions that she interviews for, thinks that person would be appropriate. She has to have the funds in order to hire that person, to offer a valid contract, come to the finance committee, get your money. There is no intention here to take that money away from the hiring process, if that be the case, but to leave it loose on the table in a bottom line budget, I believe to be a very, very dangerous thing. And that's the reason I have asked to be able to remove that money from the school committee budget. Mr. Moderator, I believe that I had some other things that I wanted to say about that, is that I don't think it's our place to discuss a contract. We don't negotiate the contract, and I think the speaker that spoke previously tonight spoke well about that action. However, if we have looked at what has been done and what has been negotiated or offered over a period of time, and to leave that money on the table in order to support what has been offered, and you have it in the handout, so I will just refer to the handout. And on the handout, it's on the one that was prepared by Mrs. Coburn. In order to support that, if you go to page number 5, you will have to be fair and treat employees equally in this town, as equal as possible. You will need an override every single year to support the operating budget. Once you put an operating budget override in place, it stays there. It is not a debt exclusion override. It doesn't have a sundown. It doesn't have a go-away time. That's the reason for this. So I think until the school committee can decide what they're going to do, and the union can decide what they want to do, which is not my business, I think we need to keep the money safe. And it's available to hire those positions whenever they decide to hire, whenever the superintendent and the school committee gives permission for hiring those positions. That's exactly why I would like to do this. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. That's all I have to say on this particular motion at this time.
Mr. Malley.
John Malley, Precinct 7, Finance Committee. I just want to say a few things about that. I have some concerns about putting the money there, only for the fact that if the money is placed in the FinCom reserve and other things come up that use the FinCom reserve money, like we had with workers' comp and health insurance last year, and that money gets spent, and then come, say, April or May, when we... Oh, sure. Come April or May, when we need that money for salaries now because we have hired these people, it's not there. And they come to us and say, we need the money now. Oh, we had to spend it because we had some overage on workers' comp, we had overage on health insurance. We had a lot. This happened last year. We didn't have enough money in the 250 reserve to pay all that overage. We had to go beyond that. I mean, it was another, I think, 400,000 over that. So my concern is that if something happens and this money gets spent, it's not, the school's not going to have it available to them. Roberta was saying that maybe you could come as they hire people and get the money, but it doesn't really work that way because you come to the FinCom when you're running out of money, but if you hire people, you're going to have plenty of money in the salary lines to pay these people till, say, April or May. Then you're going to start running low, and you have to come to the FinCom to get it. So it sits there, and then by the time they actually will need it in their salary, it might not be there if it has to get spent on some other emergency thing that takes place, and then well, I guess we go to the rainy day fund and do a special town meeting to pull it out. I don't know how you get it after that. If it's not there, though, then they're kind of out of luck, and now they're laying people off in April because they can't afford the salaries. So I think it's dangerous to do it that way. The past 2 years, last year and now this year, They've had extra money in their budget, including salaries, and have been giving it back to the town. So I don't feel like I have an issue that they're not going to do that again. They've done it for the past 2 years, so I don't have a concern with that. I think we got to be careful putting this money there because it's not earmarked for anything in particular. It's money that just increases our reserve. Thank you.
Dr. Rizzi.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of town meeting, members of our boards. Normally, or at least it has been my habit the last 5 years, to do a presentation on the budget and talk about why we developed it the way we did and the purpose of the various requests in the budget. And I'm going to do that in only a very brief way, and actually would like to save most of my comments until other people have spoken on this amendment. The budget is put together by a team of people and the school committee working very hard over a period of many, many months. The recommendations are based on the fixed costs, which are primarily salaries, but other things that you have to spend money on, like fuel and so on and so forth. And then we look at the things that we lost that need to be replaced. We look at the plans that have been developed over the last several years, doing improvements based on data that we have and needs of the school system. And then we look at the state mandates, many of which require funding in order to implement those. And then we put together a request that we believe is reasonable based on those needs. And that was the process this year. This is an unusual year, in that there are certainly, there have been some controversies about things which we normally would not necessarily have. So I will address any questions that anyone wants to ask in the course of the conversation, but I prefer to leave my comments until we get to the end of the debate.
Mr. Rock.
I'm a simpleton. I'm a simple man. Sorry, that's what I meant to say. Again, I think this whole issue, motion, indicates a distrust of the school department management to use their funds properly and wisely. Now, there's other departments that have unfilled positions, new positions, things that haven't been hired. We didn't take those away and put them under the FinCom. Yet this motion's going to require the school department to come to the FinCom meetings when they're ready to hire somebody and ask for a certain amount of money. Then when they're ready to hire somebody else, ask for more money. It makes no sense. I think the school department does a pretty darn good job of managing our schools. I haven't heard anybody say that these new positions aren't necessary. I'm on the FinCom and on the Education Subcommittee, and as I understood it, these are positions that were cut back in 2008 and 9 and 10 when we were in dire straits. These positions were vetted by the FinCom, well, first by the school department, then the school committee, then FinCom, the special committee on education of the FinCom, probably went to the Board of Selectmen. Again, we hired a superintendent. Let her run her department. Thank you.
Gentlemen, could you please identify yourself?
Sean Carr, Precinct 4. I'd like to just take a few minutes of your time, explain some reasons why we should not support this motion. As you noticed in the presentation of the motion, there was no discussion of guidelines or a mechanism for how the school gets their money. Essentially, FinCom is the judge and jury. There was no parameters by which she can get the money back. She asked for it, they could say yes or no, but there wasn't a reason why. They didn't have to give any reasons why, and the schools don't have to prove any reasons why. So let me remind everyone here, we are all elected as town meeting reps. Our school committee is elected. our Board of Selectmen are all elected. So the community votes you in. If they don't approve and like what you're doing, they vote you out. And that's what happened on our school committee recently and also on our town of selectmen. That's the community voting for change. They want to see some things different. I think this motion is not democracy, it's more autocracy of a, with all due respect, the FinCom is not elected. None of these people are elected accountable to their voters. And so I think it's really a big risk by, do you run, clarify,
Certainly,
do you
they
run
said-
for FinCom? Is that
Every
a part?
single member except for one on the Finance Committee is a town meeting member, and they have to run
Correct,
for
but that
office.
is, they're not running as a finance committee member, that the town at large votes for you, correct?
No, if you follow the procedure of town meeting, 8 precincts, town meeting members
Yes, so
are
finance committee.
are elected. Let me
Sure.
make this very clear, because we have to straighten this out with the few other town departments. 8 members of the town, of the Finance Committee are chosen each year from each precinct, and they are elected by your precinct delegates, just like you are. And there are 9 members allowed to be appointed from the registered voters of the town, who are appointed to 3-year staggered terms, staggered not to be the way from going to too many meetings, but by 3 years alternating. Those people, for the past 10 years now, all but one is a town meeting member. So they are responsible, just like everybody else in this room, for the welfare of this town. They represent the voters, specifically to handle these issues, as you are doing.
Got it. So we are all elected as town meeting reps. We are not elected as finance committee members. The point being that I think this action to take the money away, become the judge and jury, oversteps the boundaries a bit. We should have let the newly elected school committee do their job in conjunction with the school administrators. Let them have their money. When they don't use it all, they return it. So I would hope you would support my arguments to not support this motion, vote it down, let the school have their entire budget, and if they don't use it all, they will return it. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Campbell.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Campbell from Precinct 5. I'm up here to ask you to oppose the motion and fund the education budget as it's printed in the warrant. I understand that the maker of the motion, at least it's my impression, that she's making the motion because she's reflecting concerns of the Finance Committee in their report and concerns about a recently negotiated contract that was voted down. That's fine, she's entitled to her opinion. I particularly have lots of concerns about the entire process, and there's more than enough blame to go around. However, we are a legislative body. We are not an executive body. Negotiating contracts is a function of an executive branch. The Finance Committee is an advisory committee to the legislative body. It has no role in negotiating contracts. If it wants to send a message to, if you don't like what was done, you do what was done in April and you vote the next people out. If you don't like the chair of the school, the current chair of the school committee, he's up for re-election in April next year, vote him out. That is the issue. That's where that. Excuse. All right, I'll move on.
Don't enter into personalities. This is not a campaign night.
I'm not campaigning, but thank you. But my concern about this motion is that it's affecting the people that are our constituents, that are our community's future, and that have no say. You're punishing the children, our students, because you don't like what people have done. And you think you're going to teach them a lesson. I don't know what's going to solve the negotiations, but cutting money out of the school committee budget and putting it into the Finance Committee reserve is not going to do that. And our children and our students are going to suffer. And ultimately, our community suffers. We've spent a lot of time at this town meeting talking about how we want to improve our downtown, how we want to attract business, like businesses beyond fast food restaurants into our downtown that, provide life and employ, jobs for residents that are a living wage.
Let's stick to this budget.
Thank you, I am. But if we are going to do that, those places are going to be looking for how we value education. Cutting $800,000 out of the school department budget is not showing how we value education in the community. It's actually showing how we don't. I have another concern about the motion. I have a question about its legality. As I understand from the Department of Revenue, there are guidelines on how the Finance Committee reserve can be spent. And it can be spent for emergency or unforeseen expenses. It's hard to argue that these expenses, all those new positions, are unforeseen when they've been put into the warrant, discussed at Finance Committee hearings, recommended by the Finance Committee, and then have the money taken out by town meeting. They're foreseen. It is foreseen. As the maker of the motion said, she wants the superintendent to have to go to the Finance Committee to ask for the funding for those positions. That's not unforeseen. I'm afraid what would happen is the money would be cut out of the school department budget, put into the Finance Committee reserve, but then any transfers from the Finance Committee reserve, as the maker is intending to go back to the school department, would be illegal and never happen. Those positions would never be funded. Those positions are important. Some of them, particularly one of those new positions, the Elementary Adjustment Council, was already put into the budget this year. Elementary adjustment counselors deal with students that are having a lot of emotional issues. Before this position was added, and if it's not continued in next year's budget in one of those positions, it will be taken out. There were 2 elementary schools that had an adjustment counselor 2.5 days a week. All of you that have had children know that children generally do not have their meltdowns and schedule them for the 2.5 days that the adjustment counselor is available to take them. The new budget and the new positions are an attempt to address that. This motion is going to prevent those positions from being implemented. That was why I would ask that you would fund the school committee budget, the school department budget as it's printed in the warrant. Thank you.
Mrs. Ayers.
Donna Ayers, Precinct 3. I did 9 years on the Finance Committee, and I would like to suggest that in order to follow a process which is fair to all of the people who are waiting for contracts to be settled, we used to have a line item in the Board of Selectmen's budget that you would place the money that you were encumbering for the time when the budgets were settled and they were fair, and you could take that money, and it was only for the purpose of people who had finally solved the problems with the contracts and settled stuff. And it didn't disappear at the end of your year. It would continue into that line item into the next year if you didn't resolve the contracts. I would suggest that maybe that would be a good way to go with this. And for in the future, when you have outstanding contracts that haven't been settled yet. And that way, everybody has what they want and they know where the money is when they need it. And it's still there. It doesn't disappear at the end of the year. That would be my suggestion for handling this. It should have been in the first place. It shouldn't have come to this.
Mr. Anzavino.
Good evening, John Anzavino, Precinct 4. I'm one of the people that you didn't like, so you took me out. And I appreciate all the extra free time I have now, I do. I have a question on the motion that's been made for the budget in itself. Just as a point of clarification, I'm hoping you can get this, Mr. Moderator, through Town Council, that, I'm not going to read the whole motion, but in part it says, the sum that you're voting, such sum shall be expended, or the sum will be expended only for the purposes described, and further that to meet this appropriation, and it gives all the money. Now, is that an attempt to limit what you can spend the funds on, which in itself is contrary to what the statute is, and that pertains to this particular budget, which we all know is a bottom line budget. So would that be trying to restrict the budget in any fashion that wouldn't be appropriate as it is?
Mr. Fair, do you have an answer to that yet? Well, we have, if I'm not mistaken, right at the beginning of the main motion, just for,
But you don't bring it either, do you? But the town council brings it. Our bill to pay Cynthia.
Mr. We'll see how far they go with this thing. Right, the motion is still Mr. Fair will give his decision.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just to the speaker's question, I'm sorry, I just needed a little clarification as what the question was asking, is whether or not the main motion that we started this process off with would be proper. In my opinion, it is.
Okay, thank you. Now, I've heard a number of people raise the issue, contracts, so forth. I didn't hear that in the motion that's before us. What I heard was, for the majority of the money, was for positions that were in the budget that a vote has been taken at the school committee to freeze those hirings. So my question, Mr. Moderator, through you, would be to the school committee chair, that have those positions been released and the superintendent been given the authority to hire the positions that that money is earmarked for?
Mr. Ural?
Good evening. With the hiring freeze, the school committee was trying to do exactly what was sort of analogous to what Dr. Camacho was trying to do, be fiscally responsible. So there were, when we discussed the hiring freeze, there were several threats on the horizon. One was the fees associated with the, the interest associated with the non-payment of wages, and that has gone. The other one was Mr. Hartman said if this contract goes forward, we are going to make a motion to cut the school committee budget. And since there is no contract, that threat has gone. And the last threat was this $1.5 million class action suit threat. So the question is, when is it a legitimate suit? Is it
Excuse me, Mr. Moderator, the question is simple. Have the positions that were frozen been released to the superintendent for hiring?
I'm explaining it. I will get to that.
You put a freeze on. Has the superintendent been given the authority to hire the people that were put in the budget and approved up to this point?
No, I told you 3 conditions. 2 of them has been satisfied. The threat is gone. The third one is still pending. So that will be hopefully resolved.
So your answer is no, the positions have not been released?
That will be resolved within a week or so.
The answer then is no, the freeze is in place and the positions have not been released?
Not yet.
Then I think it's a very serious concern that the maker of the motion has raised, that money that is earmarked for the new positions has been frozen by the school committee, and they will use it for other reasons if they feel necessary, because they froze them. And even though at that meeting they were going to discuss it afterwards and go through it, I have not seen anything that said they released it, and according to the chair, those positions have not been released, have been hired. They've frozen it, and either the chair or the school committee as a whole are the ones that had the authority based on their vote to release that. And I believe, if I am not mistaken, and the superintendent could certainly answer, that she had received an opinion and that was illegal. So I just want to know if the positions are available to be hired by the superintendent so that we know whether we should leave the money there and let her do the hiring, or are we going to leave the money there that can be frozen by others? It's not the superintendent's prerogative whether she goes forward, because she's been directed that she cannot hire them. So I'd like to know from the superintendent what her plans are at this point, because I believe she did receive an opinion that said that that vote was not correct. So I want to know if that's been resolved with the committee. I haven't seen that yet.
Well,
Could the superintendent answer that question?
Well, let me,
I asked
let
the
me answer it. Let
Mr.
me answer it
Moderator, I
first.
asked the question to the superintendent.
But I haven't finished my answer
You did.
yet.
You answered my question, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate it. I asked you if the freeze had been released, and the answer was no. My next question was simply to the superintendent, whether she has the ability to hire the people that the $700,000 was appropriated for in this budget.
Dr. Rizzi.
Could the superintendent answer that, please?
Dr. Rizzi.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the previous speaker. It is in fact the case that the previous attorney for the school district did issue an opinion that a hiring freeze voted by the school committee is potentially not legal. However, that's her opinion. She opined that. The school committee has not changed their vote yet, so that's the opinion that I've received, but I don't feel comfortable moving forward and doing the hiring in the face of a committee vote.
Well, that's fine, and I appreciate your answer, Dr. Rizzi, and thank you, Mr. Moderator, and I just ask you to consider that the money that we're talking about does not have anything to do with contracts. It has to do with positions that were brought up through the budget process, approved up to this point, and the school committee has chosen to put a freeze on those hiring, and this money may not go that way. So I understand the concerns that if you take it away, they may not have it. You could give it to them and still not get the positions that it was supposed to be earmarked for. I just ask you to keep that in mind. Thank you very much.
Mr. Moderator?
Dr. Earl.
Just to complement what Dr. Rizzi was saying, she did indeed receive an opinion. The facts that were given to the lawyer to generate that opinion was questioned. So that's why school department hired a new attorney, and the same question has been posed to the new attorney. As far as the positions goes, it has been told to the Finance Committee there is no intention not to fill any of those positions other than in case of an emergency.
Mr. Lurie.
Thank you, Dave Lurie, Precinct 6. The $863,000 was discussed as if it was going to make this major hole in our school budget. And I was doing the math on it, and it looks to me like, as every year, and as many different school departments have done through many different districts, is they ask for the stars and the moon, and usually they'll get the moon. In this town meeting, we have a propensity to be able to give the stars and the moon to what's asked for, because we care so much about the children and so forth. Now, Dr. Rizzi has in the past made very compelling cases about how many cuts have been made during a recession and how to backfill and start to climb back to where Stoughton was in the past. I don't think there's anything about an $863,000 request to move money into the responsible hands of people who are very, very good at keeping the money in a safe place for the best interest of the town against 4, 5, whatever percent it is that we're being asked to spend this year for the school against something like 0.02% of really what's being asked to actually parked aside. We're not talking about robbing the school department of the ability to grow that department. We're not asking to do that. We're not asking her to even spend just flat of what she spent last year. We're asking to take a small percentage off so that we're not obligated to major problems that would potentially lead to a 2.5 override that we're then obligated for years and years and years, changing our position in town in a big way. That's why I'm voting in favor of this bill, this article.
Mr. Ventresco.
I agree with the previous speaker, but my question is going to be just to, through you, Mr. Moderator, to Mr. Hill. If we did put the money into the FinCom reserve, it could be earmarked especially for the schools, so anybody, other departments coming in for emergency funds could take it, right?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the speaker, and I'd have to clarify this with the town accountant, but I believe a purchase order could be put in place to hold that money aside.
Okay, so it'd be safe for the schools.
Maybe not.
Well, what do you mean, maybe not? Suppose there was a line item in there someplace.
Well, if you have, a purchase order is to encumber funds for a binding contract. Like, for example, you sign a contract with, say, a planning consultant. Planning department would have, say, a contract for, say, $50,000. You put in a purchase order for $50,000, and then you make the program payment on that. I would have to clarify that with town council, but I don't think that would be a valid
Well, let's ask
encumbrance
town
of that
council
money.
if that can be done.
But the finance committee has the right to debate and to vote on any transfer that comes before them. So if a number of members of the finance committee were of the mind that, so much money should be set aside for the school department, then it would be set aside. So,
Okay.
or any department, so, in my opinion.
Okay. Dr. Izzi, if the money was taken and put into the FinCom, would that really create a problem for you if something come up, you needed the money to hire people, you go to them, you ask them for the money, they're going to give it to you, so there's no problem there.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the previous speaker.
Dr. Rizzi.
Mr. Ventresca, thank you for asking. It is the case that every dollar in this budget was very carefully vetted. We chose only things that we thought we absolutely needed. It is, in fact, true the town meeting has been extremely generous to the school district. I understand, having asked you for multiple years for more than 2.5% increase for very, very good reasons, that is not something that we're going to be able to do indefinitely. And I will never ask you for an operational override. But everything that's in this budget is important to have now. And the thing that is not come up yet, it's already mid-June. And we're going to need to hire for September. It's already late in the hiring season. So if this money is removed from our budget, then we're not going to be able to hire people for these positions. It isn't the kind of money that we can just come back in mid-year. So yes, sir, in answer to your question directly, it would be a problem for us, and it would mean that the budget that we have developed, we could not, in fact, implement.
Well, it's still there, it's still your money, it's just in somebody else's hands. So it'll go back to you as soon as you ask for it.
But in fact, when July, if the budget passes, we would begin to post for these positions. I never post a position until the budget is passed and town meeting has vetted the budget that we've asked for. And then I believe, and I always have, spent the money exactly as it was budgeted, unless sometime later in the year there needs to be a transfer, which is a public action. But if this budget is cut by this much money, then we can't begin the hiring process. And once the school year starts, or even the summer, you can't hire mid-year. The school district has to run on the schedule of starting September 1.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Mitchell. Oh, Pat. I got, my writing is getting so small.
I thought I had a little mustache, but not that big. I'm officially changing my name to Alice because I feel like I fell down the rabbit hole and I just have not come out yet. I never thought I'd be standing here even entertaining the thought of taking school money and putting it in FinCom reserve to keep it from the school committee. I can't imagine the conversation with my husband if he was still on the school committee and I went home tonight. I'm against this, and I totally understand the reasons for it. I do. I am concerned as well. First of all, the 160 is not in the 15 budget. It's in the 14 budget. I want to be clear about that. The only reason to take the 160 would be to send a message about the contract. I just want to be clear what we're doing here. So the 160 is not in 15. The 703,000 is in 15 for new positions. I'm concerned about the hiring freeze as well. I'm concerned that the hands of the administration are being tied repeatedly. I'm not willing to put more ropes around the administration by saying you have to come to us first to get your money to hire this position. I'm not willing to do that. I understand the concerns. I share them. Believe me, I have agonized over this. I don't feel it's in the best interests of the schools or our children to tie the hands of the administration and add one more layer that has already been added to them to do their jobs, and I'm just not willing to do that. I'm going to roll the dice and hope the message has been sent loud and clear that we are all watching. And if this money does not get spent on those new positions, I shudder to think what will happen if the schools ask for a new position again next year. I am against this.
Mrs. Anzavino.
Hi, I'm Barbara Anspino. I'm the subcommittee chairman on finance. And I just had Dr. Ural made a statement a few minutes ago, and I just would like some clarification. Dr. Ural, will you? I was curious. You said there was 3 things why you put the hiring freeze on, and you said 2 of them were gone. So you said that the contract is a moot point. Is that what you said? Am I misunderstanding what you said?
So far it is.
Are you planning on having another vote on that contract?
No, we are not, unless there is some change in the votes or change in the conditions. The teachers are not coming back to the negotiating table. But since you asked, let me tell you about the third concern that will also be hopefully going away in a week or 2, and that is this threat for a $1.5 million class action suit. And the school committee lawyer has contacted the town council, so there will be a answer written and defense written, and they are also trying to figure out if it's a valid claim, where is the money going to come from? So if we are told that the school department, I mean, the money will come from somewhere else other than the school department budget, then all the conditions are gone, so the hiring freeze will be lifted.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And so when you said that the contract would not be voted on unless, what did you say, unless there's a new vote? What? I didn't quite understand that.
Unless there is a change in the conditions.
So are you telling me that you are going to try to have a vote on this contract if somebody's missing?
No, that's not what I said.
Oh, I know, that's why I'm asking for clarification. So you're saying that you're not going to try to have a vote because somebody's missing?
No.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Mr. Murphy.
On behalf of the town meeting members, I move the question.
That is to cut off debate. All those in favor of cutting off debate, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries to cut off debate. Now, next is I want to make sure you understand what you're voting on. This is on Mrs. Camacho's motion to have a new bottom line in the education budget, but this will not close off any further discussion on the education budget. It's just on this particular change that she was asking for. Yes. You'll know when you stand up because I'll watch the count. All those in favor, please rise and the chairman take a count. All in favor of the motion. I will repeat the motion, just for your edification. But please, please, if you want to, we're all getting tired. The motion is to decrease the total school department budget by $863,000, making the new total school department budget $40,167,150. And that's all it does. Now, that doesn't go on. You can still continue to discuss the budget, but not if you want to do it tonight. In other words, this will be on the table. On the motion only, not the budget, total budget. Precinct 1, all those in favor, please rise. Precinct 1 is 1. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 1. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 1. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 2. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 0. Precinct 6. 6 is 2. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 1. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 2. All those opposed, please rise. The chairman take a count. Precinct 1. Precinct 1 is 6. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is Precinct 2. 7 in 1. All right, Precinct 2. Precinct 2. I haven't got 2 yet. Precinct 2. 2. I didn't get it received. There's too much commotion going. Precinct 3. How many no's do you got? They hear it 13. Well, if you've got 14 people there? All right. You've got 14. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 14. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 15. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 13. Please keep it down. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 12. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 7. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 6. How many is? The motion is lost. Yes, 10, 88, no. At that point, I'm going to make a motion. I want you to do one other thing. I think it would be proper to table the rest of the school budget. No, we voted only on the motion, which was to transfer some money. And we didn't do. We're still able to discuss the rest of the budget. On the motion to table, all those in favor say aye. Okay. All those opposed, it's table. On the motion to adjourn, all those in favor? All those opposed, till Monday. Monday. Adjourn.